So, I'm not any better. Okay.
I just have to hold it to my ear.
Okay, that's what we're doing then?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so here we're gonna read this again. Now, this is an important concept. This is the concept of the mochin of Zer Anpin coming and filling the nai of Ima. Yivarsha mochem elu d'bnei knisasim b'Zer Anpin, before they come into Zer Anpin, mislavshin b'lavush nai d'Ima, they have to be clothed in the nai of Ima, and b'hatam, and the reason for this. Now we're reading across the top. The top says v'achar kach ratza hama'atza la'elyon, that is the flow, the best we can understand of the origin of the flow of light. So this is what the matzah wants. He wants to clothe the mochin, the 4 mochin that we talked about. We talked about also the 3 mochin and the 9. That's all the different things that we talked about, which is the Tzelem, the concept of the Tzelem. And why do you do this? In order there should be enough strength in Zer Anpin, this bol ha'oros hagadolim able to be able to handle the great lights. So what are they? They're drops. So when Abba ve'ima are always in a state of yichud anyway, so that what they're doing is they're bringing these drops down, and it's a yichud that's taking place for the purpose of producing shefa, and it produces these drops. They come from extremely penimistic a place. Shehumin Erik Anpin. So it comes out from Erik Anpin. Erik Anpin Mamshichan bin Atik, and Erik Anpin, he has got them from Atik. V'chein al derek zeh ad Rom hama'alos k'mavor tzleinu. So in just the same process here. As everything goes up to the Most High, that's where the source is, that the one feeds into the next, and is clothed in the next, and like that. Below yesh koach b'zer Anpin l'sovlim, but those lights, when they came out of the womb of Ima Eloah, he said they were just too great for Zer Anpin. He could never handle them, but he yosem oros megulim, because these lights are uncovered. They're just the light of, they're really nothing, the light of the koach of nothingness. So therefore you got to cover them up. So the purpose, of course, of this is for creation purposes, to create something physical out of something that's not. This is Masha Shenizbaritz Lenu, so this is what has been explained. We've explained this, but Drashim Shalamochim, where we talked about the Mochim. Eich Nis'alav and Nistalchol Oros Netzachod Yisod Devuna B'Tochem Lamala. So let's look at, as I said the last time, just to repeat my words, is if you looked at your own body and you imagined yourself that you are Ima, and your Netzach with your right leg, left leg, and your Sod area, all of that is going to go into parts of down below you. But what about the mochin that are yours? I mean, obviously you have an arm, you have legs, and you have a yisod. So there's mochin inside of there. What happens to them? So he says this is the key part right here. Eich nis'alab and nis'alak oros netzachod yisod the tevuna. In other words, we're saying you're called tevuna right now for metaphor's sake. And so he says that they're going into the nai of tevuna. So in other words, the nai has to leave. So it rises up. This is all part of the plan of the matzah. It produces mayim nukvin, which is a whole other story. And as a result of that, it becomes empty. So now you have kalim which are empty. They have no light in it. They don't have the light of the nai of Ima anymore. And now they're ready to be able to receive the light of the Chabad of Zer Anpin. Besod Adam ki yamis ba'ohel, and this is the secret of killing yourself for the sake of Torah. But the Torah can be fulfilled a person who kills himself over it, so to speak. In other words, to destroy the energy that's in the legs, to take it away from the legs, and make it possible therefore they're literally dead, and make it possible for now an empty space where the mochin that are going to come in for the Chabad of Zer Anpin to come into that space. Heinach Tevuna Nikras Mi, so he says, we'll go over the pasuk in a second. He says Tevuna is also called Mi, which is Mi is a gematria 50. Shemei means Atzma ala Teresh Zer Anpin, she kills herself sacrifices herself, really that's the right word, for the sake of Zer Anpin, because Zer Anpin, another word for Zer Anpin, is Torah. Shehu Zer Anpin. So Zer Anpin is the Torah, and so therefore the me, which is the Bina, and her nai are empty. She empties out her nai to make room for the child, which is Zer Anpin, to come out. Okay, so now we're on this place. So there's one reason. So then what happens is the mochin, that is the chabad, the Zer Anpin, they get clothed in there now. And what are they now? They're actually oros that are inside of the nai of Tavuna. And in this place, instead, the four lights that were unclothed are now clothed in the nai of Tavuna. So therefore, they're three only. The nai is only three. So therefore, they're called the 30. Besod shlosha mochim belvad. Now they're only three mochim because they got squeezed in. Now this is a tzimtzum. This is the concept of ismatas of the light, because the light is a reverse light. The light is a light of nothing. So therefore, in order to make it something, you continue to try to cover up this light, and then the covering becomes a covering for a covering for a covering for a covering, and it goes like that until you're really looking at what the covering looks like. That's physicality. V'sham na'asa rosham hasheni, and there at this place, he's using this concept of the rosham, which we're going to look at the TIV in a second, and we're going to go over that. He said v'sham na'asa rosham hasheni, and it makes a second stamp, because the first place was the place where it was four. That was once again, it was the chachma. Then it was the Chesadim of Das and the Gevuras of the Das going from right to left, just reading across, and then finally is Bina. So you had those of the Mochin, they were in Megula, now they're squeezed into the Nai. Then after they're squeezed in the Nai, they go into Zer Anpin, V'achar kach nechnesu b'hiyozim b'levashim k'nizkar. So now we see that now they're clothed in the Nai, they enter into Zer Anpin, Toch Resha to Zer Anpin, and then they become the secret of the tzadi Tzelem. So he went through this. Is actually, a big piece of learning here, said in a very, I guess, simple way. Do you have any questions about this?
No, not just yet. No.
Or want to make a comment? So if you ever want to make a comment, please do. We can pick up on number Nun Vav in the light print, which is not exactly where we're at, but we'll start here anyway. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm in Sonach Aleph, Nun Aleph. Where are you?
We're on page Nun now. I'm going to page Nun, and we're going to be reading the Tiv Kavanos. Okay. And we're going to be on number Kaf Vav.
Okay, good, I'm there.
Okay. So all of this is referenced, hinted at, in what the rabbis say, Al Pasuk Adam ki yams ba'ohel. So Adam. Now, if you listen to Shiurim in the morning, there's a lot of play on the word Adam. Usually means two. So he says ki yamos ba'ohel. So if a man dies in a tent, ain't div return miskaimim ela b'misha memis atzmo alach. The Torah can be only sustained by a person who is killing himself over it. And he means what? It means a mavur, ata, ki hatavuna shehi ima. So let's say that's the mother that's bringing the shefa into Zer Anpin. Hanikras mi. Why? Because mi is the number 50, which refers to Bina, which is Tavuna's aspect of Bina. He mimisa atzma love. She kills herself for the sake of her child. Behind she the matzil himself causes the stalkos, the mishalkim olas oras hanahi shalos of the lights of her nai leave her. Because b'shvil haTorah shu Zer Anpin, and all of this is for the sake of the Torah, which is Zer Anpin. She kills herself. In other words, she destroys a part of herself in order to help her Zer Anpin. She does this so that the mochin of Zer Anpin which are Chabad, should be able to be lodged and clothed in her nai. In this way, Zer Anpin is able to receive them. And they spread out through the entire length of Zer Anpin. And this is the main thing that keeps Zer Anpin alive. So that's where it says the Chochmah brings life to her husband. So let's see what her husband. Now we'll go on with number Nun Zion. And the Vizakasha and Nistalaka Oras the Nai the Ima. So when the lights that are inside of the Nai of Ima leave, Nislavshu Oras Amoch and the Chochmah Bina Das the Zer Anpin, and the Chabad the Zer Anpin goes into the evacuated the Kalim, the Mochim inside of the Kalim are gone, and now Zer Anpin's Mochim come in. Because Anetzach Bekli Anetzach Chod Yisod the Ima, and they go into the Kli of the Nai of Ima. So now the Mochin and Zer Anpin are now in the Nai of his mother. And that's where we see they got squeezed into three, so now they're all Lama Tzelem. So now we see that the Chesed and the Gevurah are clothed inside of one vessel, which is the Kli for the Yisod of Ima. So the Das, which was originally Chesed the Das and Gevurah the Das, now they're all just one element, Das, the Zah, and they got squeezed. So if you take, there's also the Mochin, the Chachma Bebina, Harechem Shlosha Mochim, this is three Mochim, should call Echad Kolom Eser Gematria Shloshim, that each one of them has 10, and that makes 30. Balkain near Mazim, Balama Tzelem, and so that becomes the Lama Tzelem, and now we're on number Nun Tes. It says, V'Rabasham of a Makom Shenislavshu Ramochan the Chabad Dezam. So now the Mochin of Zer Anpin are now in the Kelim of Ima. So this makes another stamp. Because this is the concept of the Mekifim Atachtona de Zer Anpin. Because the upper Makifim, they're the concept that was when you saw the Mochin of Zer Anpin, Megulim, they didn't have a clothing. So now this is going to be, that's the Mekifim Elyonim, that's when there were four of them, and now they're going to come, that's the first Rishon, the Mekifim Atachtainim, and then there's another set of Mekifim which is down below, Heba B'chidus Roshim V'Sheni, that's the concept of the second Roshim. And then after that they go into Zer Anpin Atzmo, as we see as we go forward. So now we're on number Samach. So now what we see, he's going through it again. The Mochim that are going to go into the head of Zer Anpin, he says that these Mochim they're going into Zer Anpin now, that is the Chabad of Zer Anpin is going into the Nai of Ima, kasher heim beluvashim b'kli Nai de Ima. So Rosh Hazah, which is inside of the head of Zer Anpin. V'sham heim near mazim b'tzod tzadet Tzelem. So there they are referenced in the tzadet Tzelem. Ki ha'chochma bin the das the zah, because the Chabad of Zah nechlochim called sphira bechem the shlosh cholochim. So now, listen, how are you doing? I'm afraid that I'm not getting through to you. It just doesn't feel like I'm getting connection over here today.
No, I'm processing this. I'm hearing it all.
Okay, so...
But there's a lot of moving parts. Initially, we used the Lashon Zachar in the Lamed, referring to Zer Anpin. And he was clothed by the Tzadi, the Tzelem, and the Men, the Tzelem, which was represented by Ima Iborim, if I'm not mistaken. And now everything seems to be moving, a lot of moving parts. How that becomes as the Mekifim of the Mekifim Tachtonim and the Mekifim Alyonim, and how the light strikes the makif or makif of Abba, and these different stages and how it translates into the languaging that we're using now.
Good.
I don't see it all.
Okay, so I'm going to try to deliver it to you, and try to create a way to explain this. This is not an easy idea. So, and I think for me personally, after this particular idea is over, we're going to get into a harder part, and I'll talk about that later. It's not that hard. Okay, the idea is like this: it is the will of the Ma'atzel Elyon to actually create everything that we see down below. So in order to do that, the nature of the Matzel, the light of the Matzel, is the light of nothingness. So if you stood me next to the light of nothingness and I touch it, I become nothing too. Because that's the nature of it. So the question is how does he deliver, how is it possible for the Ein Sof Baruch Hu to deliver his own essence into you and me? And not only that, but in everything that exists. Because it wouldn't exist because next to him there's no existence. So therefore everything gets clothed. So no matter how you look at it, if you look at the top, there's a waterfall someplace. Where the waterfall comes from is an area that we don't really talk about too much, but let's say it's Erik Anpin. It's the center of all things that are built around us. And ultimately you want to take this kernel of the Ein Sof and you want to deliver it not in Erik Anpin, not in Abba Ve'ime Eloy, not in Yisrael Saba Tavuna, not in Zachar V'Nok, but in us, in our world, in Olam Asiyah. Okay, now that part right there, we can all agree with that, correct? That's what he wants to do. Hashem wants this to be manifest in us. Now, we're coming over here to Zer Anpin, because Zer Anpin is also another word for Adam. So therefore, can you follow this idea? There's a concept called oivi. There's different ways to look at reality. One is that you look at Atzilus. All the qualities of Atzilus are duplicated in Bria, which is right next to it. So whatever is going on in Atzilus is going on in Bria. And then Yetzirah is right next to that, and it's going on there too. In other words, whatever is going on in the center of reality is going on in the periphery too. But the difference is that as you move to the periphery, it becomes more distinct, more visible, because the Ein Sof is invisible. There's nothing there. It's just hard to understand it. Okay, so here we go. We're talking about the delivery system of bringing that kernel of ultimate Ein Sof into Zer Anpin. And so what he says like this, it has to go through the channels. It has to go from whatever the Ma'atzil starts calling to Atik Yomim, that's the name of the first parts of. It has to go through Erik Anpin. Then Erik Anpin is surrounded by Abba Ve'im, and it goes through them. And they're surrounded by Zachar V'Nok, and it goes through them. And ultimately, okay, that's it. That's all part of the same thing. But we're saying that actually the deliverer to Zun, to Zer Anpin, is Tavuna. Tavuna is the parts that is immediately delivers, is the delivery to Zer Anpin. Okay, and Zer Anpin, the Nukva of Zer Anpin, Malchus is attached to Zer Anpin. So if you can get it to Zer Anpin, you're going to be able to line it up and get it over to the Nukva too. Now here's what he said. Now let's take a look at Ima, that is Tavuna. Okay, because I know you have all the words, you heard all the words, but you're missing a lot of the water that's in between. And it's my job to try to get it out, try to say it out so that's understandable. Okay, so let's look at the delivery system of Ima, and what is the delivery system we want to talk about? It's this concept. It's a concept of a type of a clothing, which is called. I keep blanking on this word. What's our subject here? What's our trouble? I blanked on this word several times. I got it on the Tzelem. Now, so this is a side idea that you haven't learned. That's the reason why I want to go over them with you, because it's important. I learn them as I teach them, or if I try to say it to you, I'm learning along with you. So the Tzelem is a lavush. It's a clothing. Remember I told you that it's drawing, if we could you can get Zoom going, I might be able to show you this stuff better in the drawing.
The cylinder, yes.
Okay, but just, I might be able to show you this. Let's talk about how are we going to get, this is the question of Ma'atzah. How am I going to get my essence into the reality of Olam Asiyah? How am I going to do that? So now we focus on different places. We sometimes, if we're living in a Sifra Ditzniuta, we're talking about one level. If we're over here, we're talking about another level. What's the level called? So that's the Tzelem. The concept of the Tzelem. Tzelem is a lavush. So the lavush has three parts. Two parts are, and they're lights. Okay? They're very powerful lights. What kind of lights are they? They're the lights of understanding, the lights of that you could see from one end of the world to the next end of the world if you were a physical being. We're talking about something not physical. So now let's talk about this lavush, which is called Tzelem. So what he's saying is like this. Imagine that Ima herself, that the light that comes out of Ima is like this. She bears out these four lights. Okay, so I could paint the picture like she's a ladder. Okay, and the first thing in the ladder is four lights sitting there in the top rung of the ladder. And we name those four lights. They are Chochmah on the right side. Next to that is the Chesed of Das. Next to that, in the middle, Das always splits. That's its nature. The Zagon says that little phrase, I like it. Is that next to that is going to be the Gevuras of Das. The Das is in the middle and it's split. And then you have Bina on the other side. So if I was drawing, I would say you have Chochmah, then the two levels of Das, and then Bina. Those are four gigantic lights of nothingness. By themselves, they're totally and completely unusable. Because Zer Anpin are us, right? We have a little tiny capsule of Neshama inside of us, which is Kadosh. You know? It has to go through all of these different stages. This is a stage. So what it is that now this Tzelem is going to influence Zer Anpin to bring the Mochin of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu into Zer Anpin. Are we okay with this?
Yes.
Okay. Now the Tzelem has three parts. First part, and he says over in this one, is it makes a stamp. When it first comes out of the womb of its mother, which is Ima Ilah, and it's just pure Mochin, the lights are unusable, as what I was saying before, unless you can get them diminished. So what happens is, and so therefore that place of the four Mochin, each one of them has 10 spheros, is what he says. So that becomes a 40, which is the letter Mem. So that's the Mem D'Tzelem. The Mem D'Tzelem is the raw Mochin. Okay, then, but that's not good enough. So you have some kind of a clothing there. That's just the beginning of it. You have to squeeze this down. So how do you squeeze it down? You squeeze it down into the Nai of Ima, and that's a Chod Yisod of Ima, which is her bottom. You squeeze it all the way into the bottom. But there were four lights. And now you're squeezing it into three. And every time you squeeze something, it's a Gevurah, but it's a Tzimtzum. In other words, it's making more physical the light of nothingness. Now, how about that? Can you handle that? The light of nothingness? Yeah, I figure. Okay.
That's creation. Yeah.
Okay, that's right. That is what creation is. It's taking nothing and making it something. So that's what he's showing us. So he's showing us how this happened. So at this stage, at the place where the four becomes three, because they have to fit into these three kalim.
Each have 10 spheros, and that becomes 30.
30, and it's stamped there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
the second Rishima or the first.
That's the second one. The first one is the four in their bare state, and now they're squeezed, and now you know that the light has been minimized.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, those are called the lower makifim. And then there's the upper makifim is the four, and the lower makifim is the three. So then he comes over and he says like this. He says, but they're too great, these lights. There's too much nothingness in it. They're not able to go into Zer Anpin, because if they did, Zer Anpin, even though that's the subject, this is how we bring them in. But at any rate, while they're coming into Zer Anpin, they would be too great. So therefore, Zer Anpin takes only the tzadi, the Tzelem. What happens is they come now into Zer Anpin, that is, their light somehow shines into Zer Anpin, but now it's in the form of a tzadi, the Tzelem. It's a light that is diminished enough into the Yesod. This is the Yesod now of Ima. Okay, so now we have that goes into Zer Anpin, and it's going to go into 9 different places in Zer Anpin, so that becomes the third Rishimo, which is the 9 times 10, which is, once again, that's 9. So now, you're right, so now you have one or Panini, that's the Tzadi Tzelem. So when you say Tzadi Tzelem, you mean the 9 places in Zeir Anpin multiplied by 10, that's the Tzadi Tzelem, but the basic part is it's inside of Zeir Anpin. The other two, the Lamed, which is the lower Makif, and the Mem, which is the upper purest Makif, are too strong to be able to go into Zeir Anpin. They just can't. In other places in the Otros, they said that the Lamed comes in, but it comes back out because it's too strong. Just different kinds of things about it, but at any rate, it's too strong to be able to be inside of Zeir Anpin. Okay, now our question is, so that's fine. So he says, what you do, you took the 3 and you took the 4, you squeezed them into 3, then you took the 3, you put it in Zeir Anpin, it became 9 places. Okay, now the question is, well, wait a minute. It says, let's back up. You have a Na'yavima. What's inside of the Na'yavima? So that's why I was trying to say, let's try this metaphor, looking at Reuven's legs. I think the rabbis always use Reuven and Shimon instead of me and you. So, okay, I'll do that too. So let's look at Reuven's legs. So if Reuven's legs are going to work, right, he needs nerves in the legs. That's the mochi. He needs energy in the legs. So the matzel, though, arranges a mayim nukvin, which is going from the bottom to the top, and he withdraws the energy and the nerves and the mochi that belong in the legs of Reuven. He takes them out. Okay? So now Reuven is legless. I mean, he has legs, but he's paralyzed. He's like a paraplegic, chas v'sholem, bar minan. So therefore, what happened? But the matzel did this on purpose. And this is an interesting idea that if you want to try to think about it, because you're going through Gilgulim with your father and so on and so forth, I think about this stuff all the time, is that this is a process of something disappearing, and later we're going to see that it's going to come back, but it's going to be different. So it's a side issue. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is so that the Matzah Elyon took the nerves out of Reuven's legs. And what's he going to do? Well, the Matzah Elyon is holding on to the Or Ein Sof, and he has a special DNA that is made strictly for Zeir Anpin's brain. And that one had been holding in his, let's say my metaphor, that it's holding in his hand, so to speak. Had been waiting for this time to come of the development of the Tzelem, that he can now empty out the Nai of Reuven and bring Shimon, who is the Chabad of Zeir Anpin, into that vacated place. Now, have I explained that so that it's understandable?
Yes.
Okay, so now what you have is, so Shimon is actually the Mochin of Zeir Anpin. So what are the Mochin of Zeir Anpin? They're Chabad. That's what the Mochin always are. So he says, so now there's empty space in the Nai of Reuven. The Chabad of Zeir Anpin now moves into that vacated space, and they're both going, all of this thing now, the legs of Reuven, which is the legs of Ima, holding inside of it the Mochin of Zeir Anpin, can now go into Zeir Anpin and plant those Mochin. How's that sound?
Sounds great. I'm with you.
Okay, so that's where you're at right now. So that's what happened to the Mochin of Ima. They disappeared, they went up, and actually they produce a whole lot of other stuff too, because it's Mayim Nukvin. Every time you have Mayim Nukvin in Kabbalah, it produces bracha. But it's in a backwards way. It has to start from the place of the Chisaron.
That's the Riboy or, yeah.
And so it has to start from the place where there's not enough light. There's that you're needing light, and it goes upward. It's looking for it. This brings light down to the place where it used to be. But that's a different Indian. Now let's come over here and let's read the words starting on number Nun Zayin again. And I think, this is a big concept, this whole idea. Okay, so it's the Tzad Tzelem. What's the idea? What does the Tzelem do? The Tzelem clothes the light of the Ein Sof, which appears as his Mochin, his 4 Mochin, and eventually it winds its way up into the head of Zeir Anpin. So now the Nun Zayin on the light print, it says Kasher Nistalka, and I'm talking about the Nun Zayin in the TIV, in case we're getting everybody mixed up. So he says, let me get over here. Well, Kasher Nistalka la Oros the Nai de Ima. So now we have the Oros of the Nai of Ima left. Nislavshu Oros Amochin the Chochma being the Das the Zeir Anpin. They come in. There's an empty space. They go in. B'kli hanetzachod yisod de'ima. So now you have the Chabad Dezah inside of the Nai of Ima. That's the language. So number nun ches. V'kasher nislavshu mochi ha-Chabad Dezah. So now when we see like this, that when you have the clothing of the mochim of the Chabad Dezer Anpin B'kli hanai de'ima, azahim nirmazim ba'os lama de Tzelem. So now we see that when they're in the Nai of Ima, that's the stamp there for the lama de Tzelem. Ki az ha-chasadim v'ha-gavuros, because now the chasadim and the gavuros nislavshu b'kli echad, which we said before, is it squeezes the middle line into one kli, and now even though they're two mochim, he said they're squeezed into one kli. Shehu kli ha-yisod de'ima, and what's the name of that kli? It's the yisod of ima. So now it's the Nai of ima, and the yisod contains the das. So Ravinir Mazim bebechinas muach echad. Now this is all called by the name of one muach, which is called das, the Zeranpin. V'im mochi ha-chochma v'rababina. So if we take the mochim of chochma and bina, harehim shlosh mochim, and these are the three mochim. The das has been squeezed into one, and now these are the three mochim. Shekol echad, kol ha'ma'esek, gematria shloshim, and that's the guy you get the lama de Tzelem. Volkein nir mazim b'lama de Tzelem. Now here we come to the around the bend. We'll read it again. V'sham b'makom shenislav shacham b'mochim de'chabad dezah. So now we have a place for the clothing, or for the lodging for the Chabad of Zer Anpin. He's a B'kli hanetzachod the ima, and where are they? They're in the Nai of ima. Na'asa harosham hasheni shel hamochen dezah. So then it makes another impression, which is the place of the. Let me read it on. Shezeh b'chinas hamakifim b'tachtain dezer anpen. This is the lama de Tzelem. Ki hamakifim elyonim heba b'chinas the rosham harishon. So the upper one, that is when they were four without clothing, they're called then the mem de Tzelem. And when they're three with clothing, then they're called the lama de Tzelem. Hamakifim b'tachtonim heba b'chinas harosham hasheni. That's the second stamp. V'achar kach nechnasa b'socha zer anpen, and then they can go into zer anpen atzmo kamosha. She is bar b'smoch. We're about to explain this. V'achar kach, and then after this, he says, Niknasim mochi ha-Chabad dezah. Now the mochim of the Chabad dezah, clothed in the Nai of ima, go into Zer Anpin. Kasher chen beluvashe b'kli hanai, when they're clothed in the kelim of the Nai de ima, and so rosh Zer Anpin, and so the Nai of ima goes into the head of Zer Anpin. Inside of the Nai de ima is the Chabad de Zer Anpin. V'sham heim nir mazim be'os besod tzadid de Tzelem, and they're the tzadid de Tzelem. Now if you ask the question, if you said, well, the Chabad Dezah is inside of a kli called the Nai de ima, so that's not exactly being inside a zah; it's being inside, but it's clothed. So he says, well, what happens to the tzadi of I guess it's the lamba, or what happens to the Nai of ima? It dissolves inside of Zer Anpin; it becomes a part of Zer Anpin, but it builds Zer Anpin as it's doing this. Ki ha-chochma bina das de Zer Anpin nechlochem kol sfira mechem l'shlosh chalokim. So this is another idea that each one of them divides into three, because when we had the place of, this is another idea, we'll finish up with this idea. He said the other idea is that now you have the three mochin inside of Zer Anpin clothed in the Nai of ima, which is disappearing. It's being absorbed into Zer Anpin actually. And so now you have these three mochin there. So, but you say they're going to spread into 9. So how is it? So we have this concept, which once again, if we could see it, it would be easier, but we'll just imagine it. They're the right line. Chochmah establishes a right line, and underneath that is Chesed and Netzach. And Bina establishes a left line, and underneath Bina is going to be Gevurah and Od. And then Das, it has a middle line, and Das has underneath it Tiferes, Yesod, and possibly Malchus, depending on how you add it up, but it is Malchus on the middle line. So then it gets divided up. So he wants to say, well, don't count the Malchus, just count the Yesod as 3 places, and you have 3 places that it develops into. That's 3 times 3 is 9, and so that's how he gets the 9. Mispashte b'kol Teisha Sfira Zer Anpin, and now it goes down to Chabad Chagad 9. That's a Chagad 9. That's a phrase we need to know that phrase. This is explained as Be'etz Chaim, called Sfira Mechan, Kolula Be'eses Spheres Prantia. So each one of these spheros is incorporated in 10 spheros, particularly Barei Kulam Heim Dishim, so you put them all together, the beginning 90, Baal Kain Heim Nir Mazin, Baal Sad Tzelem, and so forth. There, that's the side of the Tzelem. So you could review this if you want. It's going to be out maybe tomorrow or something like that on the internet. And whatever it is. Now, from here on, it gets more difficult for me. And there's just why? Because now he's going to try to touch the bracha itself, Yivarech Hashem v'Yishmerecha, like that. He's going to try to touch it to the concept of what you're bringing in while you're saying each individual word. So that means it's practical. So ultimately, my orientation about all of this goes back to the very first Likutei Moharan, where he says that your prayers can be answered as a result of coming close to Hashem through Torah, through learning Torah and praying. So here we are over here, we're learning the paths of prayer. If we want our prayers to be answered, you have to think, is your life hopeless, that you don't think your prayers can be answered? You kind of maybe think they would. How kind of energy are we investing in trying to get our ears planted? I'm not making criticism because I'm not particularly good at this, but I'm trying to learn how to get my prayers answered. And really, ultimately, like in Rabbi Mimran says, the ultimate thing you get out of your prayers and your Torah is the dvekus with Hashem. That dvekus is what Rabbi Nachman is talking about, because that's the place where the prayers are answered. And that's what we're working on now. So anyway, God bless you. God bless you, Neshama, your father. I got it, Moshe ben Menachem HaKohen. Bezech to Aliyah after Aliyah. And thank you for letting me explain this. And you know what? He's going to say it again in lots of different other places. So now you heard it one time. And you know that word he used, the Roshem, the stamp. And now the Tzelem used to say, Ein Heder Beruchnias. So even though you and I heard this, and we're going to forget it tomorrow because we'll be somewhere else, it made a Roshem anyway.
Absolutely.
And it should go in you and us and our families, and we should all grow in health. I thought you told me today you were going someplace to have a test or something.
4-7, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, Hatzlacha and everything. Call to it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Try to get it normal. Okay, bye.